Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Steve Kim, who stated, "Don't know if this has been reported or not, but I'm told about between Boots Ennis and Custio Clayton of Canada, as an IBF eliminator is being discussed. Hopefully it can come together for April, May-ish." And it seems like it's been an eternity since the IBF mandated the champion, Spence Jr., to fight.
The last mandatory satisfied for them was Carlos Ocampo 3 years ago.
That was in June of 2018, and it's not like the IBF hasn't been ordering other fighters, other champions, to satisfy their mandatory challengers. In late 2020, Anthony Joshua had to satisfy his in the form of Kubrat Pulev. Very soon, Maris Briedis, he may have to satisfy his mandatory challenger in J.O. Pataya. It's not like mandates haven't been coming down. They have. But for the last 3 or so years, Errol Spence Jr. in the welterweight division, that division's IBF champion, it seems like it's been an eternity since he satisfied a mandatory challenger for the IBF, and this creates a very interesting situation because the winner of this fight will be in a pole position to challenge him, either him or the winner of Spence versus Ugas, which could very well be Ugas. If this fight materializes, the winner of Ennis versus Clayton will be in a pole position to challenge the winner of Ugas versus Spence. And there's a line forming because the winner of Butaev versus Stanionis is supposed to be able to challenge the winner of Ugas versus Spence. Keith Thurman, who was in action this past weekend, he also wants to challenge the winner of that fight.
Yeah, but he's not a mandatory challenger with any of the alphabets.
He isn't. I've expressed my enthusiasm for this fight, Ennis versus Clayton. This will be a legitimate acid test for Jaron Boots Ennis against Canada's own Custio Clayton, an Olympian, a good stick-and-move fighter.
Unbeaten.
I think we'll learn a lot more about Jaron Boots Ennis in a potential Custio Clayton fight than what we learned from him in a Thomas Dulorme fight or a Sergey Lipinets fight. I mean, the outcomes of those matches really did seem like foregone conclusions.
And maybe to some degree the outcome of this one seems like one too.
Though for my money, if Jaron Boots Ennis can stay in character and continue to be the guy that he's been, exhibiting the ceiling that he's been exhibiting, against an unbeaten stick-and-move guy like a Custio Clayton, kind of guy that could be a spoiler, if he can stay in character with that guy, well, that's very encouraging. You make more of a statement beating a Custio Clayton than battering a Thomas Dulorme.
A guy who is so obviously on the back nine.
When there's not much chance of getting a Keith Thurman in the ring or a Danny Gersha in the ring for Jaron Boots Ennis, this is the next best thing. Fight who's out there, fight who's willing.
This is likely going to be on Showtime,
where Jaron Boots Ennis fights exclusively, and let's hope that they get this fight over the line because it creates a very interesting situation for the winner of Ugas versus Spence.
Yeah, quite a few mandatories to satisfy.
They might, whoever the winner is, whoever the winner ends up being. And just in keeping with the theme of welterweight news, Keith Thurman, who was in action this past weekend, stated, "I want belts, champions. I want to be back on top." Thurman is now back in the mix at 147 pounds after winning a 12-round unanimous decision over former super lightweight world champion, secondary champion, Mario El Azteca Barrios in the main event of a Fox Sports PBC pay-per-view event Saturday night from the Michelob Ultra Arena at Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. This was a comeback fight after 2.5 years away, said Clearwater, Florida's Thurman. "I wish I had my best performance, but I did the best I could under the circumstances. I grade this performance a C+ or a B- for myself."
At least he's being honest.
A guy who was knocked out in his last fight at 140 pounds, moving up to 147 pounds, going the distance with today's Keith Thurman is an indictment.
An indictment on Thurman's power.
Because that same guy was knocked out by a lightweight, moving up to super lightweight, and that same guy moves up to welterweight, and you couldn't take him out the way that lightweight did.
So what does that say about you?
Keith Thurman was quoted as saying, "We rocked him, we weren't able to put him down and out, but we had a great performance and a great fight."
You think Mario Barrios would go the distance with Jaron Boots Ennis?
Radzav Butaev, Jamal James, a far more experienced welterweight than Mario Barrios. He couldn't go the distance with Radzav Butaev. Do you think Mario Barrios would have?
Fuck no!
You went the distance with Keith Thurman this past weekend, so what does that say about Keith Thurman? What does that say about today?
You know what they say? They say power's the last thing to go.
That's what they say, and it seems that Keith Thurman's power must have went, and it must have went a long time ago, since it's been years.
I think his last recorded knockout was the Luis Collazo fight.
7 years ago when Luis Collazo retired in his corner after about 7 rounds. 7 rounds, was it?
You're telling me it's been 7 years since Keith Thurman racked up anything resembling a knockout?
Keith Thurman, who says, "I want belts, I want the champions, I want to be back on top." So whoever is willing to send Keith Thurman the contract let's go. In my heart of hearts, what I think Keith Thurman wants, what he's looking for, is to be fast-tracked to the winner of Ugas versus Spence. And the problem is, there may be one or two guys ahead of him in the queue, which I just mentioned, which just talked about. The winner of Radzav Butaev versus Emantas Stanionis is supposed to have first dibs on the winner of Spence versus Ugas, and we can't forget that the IBF may be in the process of orchestrating a final eliminator between Canada's Castillo Clayton and America's own Boots Ennis.
He might want the winner of Spence versus Ugas in a jiffy.
Keith Thurman did. He might want the winner of that fight in a jiffy, though I'm not sure he's in a pole position to get him. He also mentioned Terence Crawford. He said, I do like the fight with Crawford. We'll see how stubborn we get with the split.
In an ideal world, this would be the next fight for Keith.
But things in the world of boxing are seldom ever ideal. The former unified welterweight champion said, well, you know, the fact that he's a free agent should make things a little better.
Should is a four-letter word in boxing.
He said, working with Bob is no fun for a lot of fighters. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure. You know, you see what I'm wearing now, a WBC medal. You see what I'm representing. They've been asking me for a long time, where are you ranked, Keith Thurman? And I say, pfft, I don't know. I'm one of the best fighters in the world. Who cares what rank they give me, what number they give me, what position they give me? You know, I do want to fight champions. I'm going to be looking forward to getting in the ring with a champion. I want the opportunity to get a world title again. So if Crawford is the best opportunity, I'll take it. You know, I always love great fights. I love making exciting fights in the welterweight division. But like I said, you see what I'm representing right now. So this might be the ladder that I'm climbing.
He's going to WBC route.
We know that the Errol Spence versus Yordanis Ugas fight, none of these fights would have manifested if Keith Thurman didn't lose to Manny Pacquiao. So there was a shift in matchups when I fell out of championship status.
Looks a lot like Keith's going to WBC route.
But via the WBC route, Virgil Ortiz is currently ranked as the WBC's #1 contender. Behind him
is David Avanesian, Jaron Ennis, and Danny Gersha.
The name of Keith Thurman does not appear in the WBC's last set of updated ranked standings, though when they update them again, I'm sure he'll emerge somewhere in there. For now, he's not registered. He added, so I had the WBA, I had the WBC, I relinquished the WBC, nobody beat me for the WBC world title, you know, so those belts I want back in my possession. I do like the fight with Terence Crawford, but we'll just have to wait and see what opens up, what really negotiates, how stubborn we get when it comes to what kind of split there is, you know? It's just business from here on out. I do like the fight, though, and in an ideal world, that would be the fight because Terence Crawford is free and Keith Thurman is free. Terence Crawford, he's not with Top Rank anymore, so they can't use that as an excuse not to negotiate with him, and yet...
Does it look like he's going the WBO route?
He's on a WBC route, and somebody on Keith Thurman's side of things made that decision to put him on that path, to send him the WBC route as opposed to the WBO route. Essentially what I'm getting at is, if he wanted a Terence Crawford fight, he'd be angling for a Terence Crawford fight, but he's not.
Somebody made the decision to get the WBC involved.
Whoever it was, whether it was Keith Thurman himself or a member of his team, his manager, maybe it was Al Heyman, whoever made that decision, they don't seem to have made that decision with Terence Crawford in mind, because if they had Terence Crawford in mind, they'd be angling for a WBO title shot, not a WBC title shot.
Terence Crawford isn't with any major promoter right now.
We talked about what's going on between him and the people at Top Rank, the people who don't promote him anymore, and without a major promoter in his corner to help finance the fight, the probability of him getting a Keith Thurman in the ring hinges on the PBC financing the fight. We heard what Tim Smith said. We heard what Tim Smith said in reference to a Crawford versus Spence fight, that they may not be able to get Crawford the kind of numbers that he wants, the kind of numbers that he's looking for. Essentially what he's saying is they don't want to pay for Crawford versus Spence, but they're going to want to pay for Crawford versus Thurman.
Well, first and foremost, Thurman and his people have got to want the fight, and I don't think they do.
Him ending up going the WBC route doesn't happen on its own. It's not some random occurrence in time and space. So that is a decision that someone made.
It's not the fucking Aurora Borealis, right? Somebody decided that.
Listen, I can only tell you what I think, and if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, Keith Thurman says that he wants the champions, but when he says champions, he's being very specific. I don't actually think he has Terence Crawford in mind. He says he's open to that fight, but I don't believe him. You're on the WBC route. After all this time...
When they were mapping out your next move, that's the path they chose.
And that don't lead you to Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford right now, he's not with a major promoter, so who'd finance this fight anyway? Not the PBC. They don't want to finance Crawford versus Spence, so why would they want to finance Crawford versus Thurman?
Right now, Butev's supposed to be fighting Stanionis.
Jaron Ennis is supposed to be fighting Custio Clayton. Not that I think that Keith Thurman would keep busy with any of those four guys, I don't, but even if he wanted to, those guys are preoccupied. So the ideal fight for Keith Thurman at this time, now that he's had a tune-up fight...
The ideal title fight for Keith is Terence Crawford.
If he wants to fight for a title in his very next fight, if he's being more specific, if he's focused on winning back the green belt, he should at least have to face Virgil Ortiz, who's ranked #1 by way of the WBC. Either Virgil Ortiz, David Avanesian, or Jaron Ennis. He should have to work his way back to a title shot. He shouldn't fight a guy who moved up from 140 pounds after getting knocked out.
You beat Mario Barrios, so that's supposed to get you a title shot.
Is that all it takes? Think about all the hoops they wanted Terence Crawford to have to jump through in order to get an Errol Spence Jr. fight. And Terence Crawford, unlike Keith Thurman, is a reigning champion, a reigning world champion. And they wanted him to jump through hoops, so why should Keith Thurman get fast-tracked to the winner of Ugas versus Spence? After fighting Mario Barrios, is that all it takes?
The ideal fight would be Crawford versus Thurman.
But like I said, things are seldom ever ideal in the world of boxing, and even less ideal in today's welterweight division.
I don't actually think Keith Thurman is going to fight Terence Crawford.
I don't think he wants to run risks with guys like Virgil Ortiz, who's a Golden Boy Promotions fighter anyway, so there are politics involved. I don't think he wants to run risks with the likes of a Jaron Boots Ennis, who fights on Showtime, though all the same.
I don't think he wants to run risks with any of those guys.
What he wants really is a lot more specific, and there may be one or two guys ahead of him in the queue as far as getting the winner of Ugas versus Spence. So let's see how Queefy goes about getting the winner of that fight. Let's see how he goes about getting that fight. Finally, I'm sure most of you have heard by now, by way of Talk Sport, nearly done. Eddie Hearn confirms Tyson Fury versus Dillian Whyte contract has now been received and clarifies his involvement as fight edges closer to being finalized.
These kind of play-by-play updates are becoming normalcy in boxing, aren't they?
Becoming. They are normalcy in boxing these days. Asked if they'd now received the contract, Hearn told Talk Sport at the weekend, yeah, so it's being reviewed now by Dillian's lawyers. I've got a meeting with him tomorrow. In purse bids, it's a simple bout agreement, so it depends what comes with the contract that's been sent. I don't envision many problems.
Listen, I'm a boxing fan, and what I want are boxing matches.
That really is my level of interest in this entire sordid affair, and for me, that would be the best case scenario. That would be the best outcome if they actually fight.
So many of you already know I have my reservations.
I don't know if they will. Eddie Hearn continued, I work fight by fight with Dillian. He's a close friend of mine. I guess my involvement is whatever he wants me to do in the night. We talk to his team virtually every day. We've done for entire last 2 months, but Frank won't really want me involved in the promotion, which is no problem. I've got enough on my plate if they don't want me to help in the promotion.
Well, why should he? These guys won a price bid. Let them carry the load.
Frank Warren, Tyson Fury, and Tyson Fury's fans, they've been gloating about it ever since the purse bid.
You won. Congratulations. Now go promote the fight.
It's a good job. Eddie Hearn continued, so I'll sit down with Dillian and say, what do you want me to do? We've got a lot of fights going on, but I'll always back him, and I want him to win the fight. We'll just chat and say, this is our involvement.
So wait a minute. If he's just now getting the contract, why was Tyson Fury ordering him to sign it days ago?
Approximately 2 or 3 days ago, Tyson Fury was demanding that Dillian Whyte sign the contract. What contract? He's just now getting it. He's just now receiving said contract. So what is it that you wanted him to sign?
It's more gaslighting is what that is.
You guys should be used to it by now. Tyson Fury's nonsense and the nonsense that he puts out there just to get a reaction from the crowd, just to galvanize and energize his audience that eats this stuff up even when there's evidence to the contrary, even when it doesn't make sense. He tells a guy to sign a contract that he hasn't even sent him.
He's just not getting the contract.
I don't really have the stomach for it anymore. I don't. What I want more than anything, the most favorable outcome out of all of this sordid affair, this mess, would be if the fight actually materializes, though I have my reservations as to whether or not that will happen. I'd like to see Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte hash it out in the ring, because I don't view Tyson Fury as this invincible heavyweight like everybody else. At minimum, I think the fight makes for a great fight based on the styles, the base styles of the fighters. Tyson Fury has shown vulnerability before, against McDermott, against Chisora in the first Chisora fight. He was knocked down by Steve Cunningham, a cruiserweight.
More recently, the Swede Otto Wallin gave him hell.
Talk about it all the time, and I'd actually seen Otto Wallin in action leading up to that fight. Didn't look nothing special, nothing to write home about. I saw him before that fight, and I saw him after that fight against Dominic Breazeale. He looked bang average. He was in action more recently, this past weekend, on the undercard of Eubank versus Williams, and once again,
He looked bang average.
Tyson Fury struggled with this same guy, so I happen to think if you put him in there with a Dillian Whyte, as opposed to an Otto Wallin, you're gonna get an exciting matchup. You're gonna get an exciting fight.
Isn't that what boxing fans want? Exciting fights?
They think of Tyson Fury as being all but invincible, untouchable. He was knocked down by Nevin Pajcik, knocked down by Steve Cunningham, knocked down 4 times by Deontay Wilder throughout their trilogies, and he got touched by Otto Wallin. At minimum, Otto made him work for it. So the idea...
He's not invincible, and that makes for a great fight.
As far as I'm concerned, the most favorable outcome for me, the consumer, the boxing fan, is if the fight actually materializes. If the fight actually happens. I'd love to be wrong about this. I'd love for my reservations about this fight not happening to be off base. I'd prefer to see them fight.
I just don't know if they will.
Not while Tyson Fury's still playing games and gaslighting the boxing community into thinking that Dillian Whyte is hesitant to sign a contract he hadn't even sent him 2 or 3 days ago, or whatever it was.
I see that stuff, and I see that he's playing to the crowd.
Even if news breaks this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon or sometime later on down the week that Dillian Whyte has officially signed said contract, there's still room for things to go wrong. Somebody could get injured. Somebody could contract COVID.
Just in time to fuck up the whole fight.
As stated, the most favorable outcome for me is if the fight actually materializes, but I don't know if it will.